Can you believe it was 10 years ago this year that Playback was first launched to the world? An app that started on the back of a napkin is now quite literally used by thousands of worship leaders in thousands of churches in hundreds of countries every single weekend. I wonder if you can remember when you first opened Playback. Most of our customers actually can't remember the date or the year that they opened Playback, but the feature that first attracted them to open the app. Maybe it was the first time you could send multiple channels from an iPad to the sound desk, or the first time you could send MIDI to control things like ProPresenter, or more recently Tap Tempo, Pad Player, or maybe even automations. Every time a new feature comes out in Playback, it causes one of two reactions. Number one, people realize that technology is no longer beyond their grasp and that they can introduce it to their church culture. And number two, people that use a different platform wonder why they are spending so much time doing it that way, and they have another look at Playback. It's those stories of Playback that really fascinate us. Every worship leader, every church, every way of leading has a different culture, and therefore the use of Playback varies widely across all of our user base. So when we create a new feature like the one I'm going to show you today, we never want to force customers to use it in one particular manner. What we want to do is put creative tools in your hands so that you can do something with it that we couldn't even dream of. So in today's webinar, I'm going to show you a brand new feature called Remote. And we really are excited to see what you do with Remote in your context. So what is Remote? Quite simply, it's the ability to open up Playback on a host device, like the one back here at Keys, and for anybody else on stage to use their own iOS or Mac device to take remote control of that Playback. Now the word game changer gets thrown around an awful lot, and it makes us here at Multitracks laugh every time we see it on social media. And maybe this isn't a game changer, but I do believe it's a rule changer. Some of the limitations that you've had in your church on cables can't run this far, or I don't have this piece of gear, or only this person can control tracks, now all of that changes. And we're really excited to show you some of the ways you can use Remote. So let's dive in, let's head to the Keys world and have a look at host Playback and how we set up Remote. So in this environment here in our studio, main Playback and all of the tracks are being run by the Keys player, who's also going to be our MD. Now this is quite a common scenario that you'll see in many churches. Playback is here on the Mac, it's going into an audio interface, and all of the channels of audio are being run to our front of house. In a moment, I'll show you how we can connect other remote devices to take control of this Playback. But first, we need to change a setting or two inside of the MacBook. So I'm going to come over here to the stack menu, click on there and scroll down, and now there's a new line that says Playback Remote. When I click that, I've got two options. I can host a remote session, or I can be the remote joining a session. I'm going to toggle on Allow Remote Connections and come back outside into Playback. Now, anybody that's on the same network, in the same organization, and has access to the set list will be able to get out their copy of Playback on Mac or on iOS and join this remote session, see the set list, and take control. So let's see how we do that inside of the mobile device. So now over on the mobile device, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to press the stack menu, come down to Remote, and now you'll see that it's defaulted to the Remote tab, and I can see the MacBook session being broadcasted there. I'm going to tap MacBook and it's going to load. So now I have a carbon copy of what's happening on main Playback, the host, here on my Remote. Look at the master fader on both devices. As I move here with my finger, the master fader is moving in real time. There's zero latency. The technology between the two is incredibly stable. I'm going to come down and tap on Million Little Miracles and scroll down to the bridge and press play. And we're going to get an instant fade in of song section pre-roll, fading in on main Playback, being controlled from here. If I'm going to press pause, it's going to stop. Press pad, going to turn off the pad. I can change the pad player and change the key if I wanted to. And I can also change transitions. There's a ton of things that I can do using a remote device. So let's go and have a look at how we might use Tap Tempo as a drummer. So one of the things that drummers love to have control of is the tempo of the band and of tracks. That's often why Playback is next to the drummer in the first place. But in this scenario, Playback is still being controlled by the keys, but this remote device now allows us to also control that Playback. Let me show you Tap Tempo. Here we're going to load in a pad, and we've got a pad here at 74 BPM and at 4/4, and I can just press play, and straight away I'm going to have that pad in the key of A flat and the click playing. at 74 BPM. But what if the worship leader starts a song in a different tempo? Now I can come up here and I can use my finger, MIDI controller, maybe an SPDS, trigger pad, and I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to have a pad playing at 67 BPM because that's what I tapped in. And again, I'm going to get the count in, the pad, and the click for that song. Let's just do another example of that one. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got a faster song at 158 BPM. And again, I can tap that in. So we can give relevant controls to different people on the stage, specific to their instrument or their role. Let's have a look at how a worship leader might want to have control of the loop and the forward and next sections so that he can work with a music director, but not independently. One of my favorite things about Playback Remote in the context of the connected stage is the fact that I can take any MIDI controller and make it wireless. This is incredible for worship leaders that lead worship from guitar, but still want to use a music director, because I can have one button to be loop, one button to be play, one button to navigate through song sections. So if I take my phone here, which has got the remote session loaded, and plug it in to this Apple connector kit, I'm plugging this into a Disaster Area's MIDI controller. A controller that's a few years old and definitely is not wireless, now can control playback across the entire connected stage. Pressing this play button is not only going to start the tracks over here in playback land, but it's also going to make sure that all the MIDI controlling Pro Presenter, lights, or the chart builder is all perfectly in sync as well. I can use the other buttons to navigate down through the timeline, select the section that I want to go into. I can press a button for loop, turn on the pad, anything else. But not only does Playback Remote allow me to send MIDI in to a phone and send that wirelessly, but another phone on the network can receive that information and send MIDI out as well. So over here on our guitar player, he's using a Helix. We've plugged his phone into the Helix, and as I launch different songs here, it's going to call up the snapshots that he needs for those different sections of the song. So let me show you this using I Speak Jesus. So you'll notice that as I navigate down through the timeline of I Speak Jesus, we've got these little blue triangles. They're MIDI messages that are being sent to the Helix to tell it which preset or snapshot to turn on for that part of the song. We actually program them on the MacBook back in Keys World, save them to the cloud, and then they appear on every device. And simply by plugging the Helix into the phone down here on the floor, the Helix is ready to receive those MIDI cues. So let me wind just before verse 3 and press play. And now, as we approach verse 3, the playhead's going to pass this blue triangle, and the Helix is going to jump from that one snapshot to another one. Let me show you that again. If I wind to the end of verse 3 and press play, as we go back into the chorus, again, it's going to change for the snapshot that it's needed. Now we've got the ability to control anything that can receive MIDI. Could be a different drum sound, different guitar patch, bass, keys, you name it. In this environment, the Helix, plugging it in simply to a phone using USB so that playback can keep everything in sync all the time. So those are a couple of different ways that musicians can use Playback Remote in their respective stations. But what about your front of house engineer? How might they use Playback Remote to have even more control and feel even more part of the team? Let's jump to Joshua at the back of the room, who's running the sound desk today, to talk a little bit about how he's going to use Remote as a front of house engineer.
The final use case of Playback Remote that we're excited to share with you today is how you can expand control of your tracks all the way from the stage to the sound engineer's desk. Let's talk through a few different situations that this might be useful. Number one, let's say you have a smaller setup and the main playback device is all the way on stage and you're back here at the sound engineer's desk. With Playback Remote, regardless of the amount of outs you have, you can still control the dynamic amount of your sound just by dialing in the different stems. That way that pesky little shaker sound that you're trying to get rid of, you can bring it down without having to rid yourself of all the rest of the amazing percussion sounds your tracks are using. Number two, let's switch that paradigm. The main playback device is now at the sound engineer's desk and the musicians on stage are utilizing Playback Remote. What does this do for you? Well, you no longer need an audio interface. You can plug directly into your soundboard and receive all of your tracks. This is going to help you because you won't run out of channels because it basically turns your soundboard into an audio interface. Let's go to number three, pad player. As a sound engineer, I think you have the right to dial in the sounds of the pad. So having Playback Remote You can just remotely access and bring up that shimmer, bring more of the tonic in. I think it's going to really help you dial in that overall sound. Let's end out with MIDI and SMPTE. You no longer have to go back to the stage to fix any kind of MIDI cues or SMPTE cues. With remote playback, you can just basically fix it all right here. It's all within reach of your production director, your sound engineer, who's ever running your MIDI cues and SMPTE. It's going to simplify the whole process. We really do believe that Playback Remote is going to be a great way to include the sound engineer in the overall ecosystem of how your worship team worships on Sunday. And back to Christian to close us out.
So hopefully you've been inspired to think of different ways that you can use Playback Remote inside of your church. Maybe you're going to give control to the drummer for tap tempo. I wouldn't. I don't trust drummers. But maybe you're going to give it to your front of house engineer to mix the stems, or allow your guitar player to automatically change patches. We're really excited to see the different ways that you use Playback Remote. Playback Remote is available today, included in the premium tier of Playback, but here's the great news. Anybody that wants to remote into that session, even if they are only using Intro, that's the free version of Playback, will be able to do so. And Intro users will get all of the premium features just by joining a remote session. They simply need to be in the same organization and added to the setlist to work. This is what I would love you to do. I'd love you to check out Playback Remote, take a video or a photo of you using it in your church, and upload it to social media using the hashtag #PlaybackRemote. We'll choose one winner and send you a brand new iPad for free for you to use remote at somewhere else, and we'll share a whole bunch of the stories that we get tagged in. Take care, God bless, bye-bye.